My husband smugly declared his paycheck was now his money, and I'd cover half of everything. So I agreed, split every bill to the penny, and stopped quietly covering for him. Days later, a notice arrived that destroyed his smile completely. The certified letter sat on my kitchen counter for 11 minutes before I opened it. I remember the time because the microwave clock said 6:42 p.m. when I walked in, and it said 6:53 when I finally slid my thumb under the flap. Lily was at the table doing her worksheet, the one with the dinosaurs tracing letters with a purple crayon, and I didn't want her to see my face do whatever it was about to do. Inside was a petition. Daniel Rosser, my husband of 9 years, was suing me for full custody of our 6-year-old daughter, half my retirement savings, half the house, and alimony. The grounds listed were abandonment and financial abuse. I read it twice. Then I laughed. A short, ugly bark of a laugh that made Lily look up from her dinosaurs and ask, "What's funny, Mommy?" "Nothing, baby," I said. "Just something Daddy wrote." Because here's the thing about that letter. 3 weeks earlier, I had been the one who left him a printed spreadsheet by his coffee mug. I had been the one who said okay to his little speech about fairness. And in the time since, I had collected 47 pages of proof that the man accusing me of abandoning our family had been quietly draining money into a hidden account and flying to San Antonio to sleep with a woman from his office. So when I say I laughed, I want you to understand. It wasn't because the letter didn't scare me, it was because I knew something Daniel didn't. I'd been documenting everything for 2 weeks, and documentation, it turns out, doesn't care how loud you yell. I'm Claire Bennett. I was 34, a senior software engineer at a mid-sized fintech company in Austin, making $145,000 a year. Daniel was 36, worked in regional sales for a building supply distributor, and made $78,000. We'd been married 9 years, together for 11, and we had Lily, who was 6 and obsessed with dinosaurs and absolutely allergic to bedtime. For most of those 9 years, our finances worked the way a lot of finances work when nobody talks about them out loud. I made more, so I paid more. Not officially, not by agreement. It just happened. The mortgage came out of my account because my account could absorb it. The daycare autopay was linked to my card because I'd set it up first. Back when Lily was 8 months old and Daniel was between roles, and it never got switched. Groceries, insurance, the Honda Accord payment, the orthodontist for Lily, all of it ran through me. Daniel paid his phone bill. He covered dinner out sometimes, usually when it was his idea. He bought himself a PlayStation 5 the same month our water heater died, and I paid the $1,400 repair bill out of my emergency fund without a word, because what was I going to do? Make it a fight? I told myself it evened out over time. I told myself he worked hard too, just in a job that paid less, and that wasn't his fault, and love isn't a ledger. I want to be honest, I believe that. For years, I actually believed that. The red flags were small enough to explain away. Daniel started needing the office on weekends more, closing out quarterly numbers, he said. He started taking his phone into the bathroom, which I told myself was just a guy thing, scrolling Reddit on the toilet like every other man in America. He went to San Antonio for regional training 3 times in 8 months, which struck me as odd only because his territory was East Texas, and San Antonio wasn't really near anything we covered. But I had a full-time job and a 6-year-old and a 9 p.m. bedtime battle every night, and I didn't have the bandwidth to interrogate my husband's travel itinerary. Then came the dinner. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were taco night, and Lily had ketchup on her chin, and Daniel set down his fork the way he does when he's about to say something he's rehearsed. "I've been thinking," he said, "about money, about fairness." I said, "Okay, go on. My income is mine now. We split everything 50-50, like adults." I looked at him for a second. He had this expression, chin slightly raised, like a man who just delivered something profound at a dinner party, like he expected me to nod thoughtfully and say, "You know, that's a really mature perspective, Daniel." I took a sip of water. "Okay," I said, 50-50. He smiled. That was his first mistake, because I am, by trade, a person who builds systems, and nothing makes a system builder more dangerous than handing her a clean, simple rule and saying, "Go ahead, apply it retroactively." That night, after Lily fell asleep, after the third one more book, after the glass of water, after the I'm scared of the shadow on the ceiling that required me to explain, again, what a ceiling fan was, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and 6 years of bank statements. I told myself it was just curiosity. I told myself I'd open the file, glance at a few numbers, and go to bed. 4 hours later, I had a spreadsheet with 11 tabs. Mortgage, $2,050 month. Daycare, before Lily started kindergarten, watered $400 month for 3 years, then after-school care at $620 month. Groceries, averaged from 18 months of receipts, $2,100 month. Health and auto insurance, $480 month. Utilities, $310 month. Car payment on my Accord, the one we both drove technically, though Daniel had taken it to his gym 4 times a week for 2 years, $390 month. Total recurring household cost, $7,130 a month. His half, by his own new rule, $3,765. His take-home pay, after taxes, and his 401k contribution, $4,800. That left him $1,135 a month for gas, his phone, his clothes, his hobbies, and anything else a grown man might want to do with his life. I sat there looking at that number for a long time. My hands were steady. That surprised me looking back. I think I expected to feel rage. What I actually felt was something colder, clearer, like the moment a bug finally makes sense after 3 hours of staring at a stack trace. I built one more tab. I labeled it 6-year reconciliation. I calculated what Daniel would have owed every month for the last 6 years under his new rule and what he'd actually paid. The gap was $214,000. I didn't print that tab. I printed the first one. 11 pages, stapled with a cover sheet that just said, monthly household expenses, 50-50 split, effective immediately. I left it on the counter, leaning against his coffee mug, the way you'd leave a grocery list. The next morning, I watched him pick it up over the rim of my own coffee. He scanned it the way you scan junk mail, half interested, already thinking about something else. Then his face changed. I want to describe this carefully, because it's the first time I saw what I'd later learn to recognize as the mask slipping. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was confusion, fast and genuine, followed by something that looked almost like panic, his eyes moving down the page a second time like he thought he'd misread it. What is this? You're half, I said. You said 50-50. I agreed. I just did the math. I can't afford this. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Interesting, I said. I've been affording all of it for 6 years. He set the pages down like they'd gotten hot. This isn't, Claire, this isn't what I meant. What did you mean? He didn't have an answer. He picked up his keys and left for work 12 minutes early, which he never does. I told myself, okay, he'll come around. Either he apologizes or he pays it, or he admits he didn't actually think this through. Any of those outcomes I could have lived with. What actually happened was nothing. He didn't pay that weekend, or Monday, or Tuesday. The spreadsheet sat on the counter, then migrated to the junk drawer, then I assume ended up in the recycling, because by Thursday it was gone and neither of us mentioned it again. I told myself it was a stalemate. I was wrong. It was a retreat. And Daniel doesn't retreat without bringing reinforcements. I came home on a Friday to find a pair of heels by the door that weren't mine, and a woman I didn't know sitting on my couch with a glass of my wine. Hi, she said, standing up like she'd been waiting for this moment. I'm Megan. Daniel's told me a lot about what's going on. Megan, it turned out, was a friend from Daniel's gym, divorced twice, with what I would learn was a very specific and very loud philosophy about marriage. Daniel had apparently spent the last 3 days venting to her about how I was turning our marriage into a transaction. I just think, Megan said, settling back into my couch cushions, that when you start itemizing a partnership, you're telling your husband he's not welcome in his own home unless he pays rent. My hands were not steady this time. I could feel my pulse in my palms, but I kept my voice level. I'd learned over 6 years of being the calm one in every argument that calm reads as strength and heat reads as hysteria, even when the heat is justified. Can I ask you something, Megan? Of course. How much alimony did your second husband pay after you left him for, and I'm just repeating what Daniel told me, not providing enough? Silence. The kind of silence that has texture. Daniel, standing in the kitchen doorway, snapped first. Jesus, Claire, you're destroying our family over money. No, I said, and I remember this part clearly because it was the first time I said it out loud and felt how true it was. I'm exposing it. Megan left about 10 minutes later. She did not finish the wine. The next red flag came on a Tuesday around 4:15 p.m. while I was in a sprint planning meeting. My phone buzzed with a number I recognized, Little Explorers After School Care, where Lily went 3 days a week. Hi, Mrs. Bennett. This is Dana from the front desk. I just wanted to let you know Daniel's auto pay for this month's tuition bounced, and we haven't received the manual payment either. We do need that resolved by Friday, or we'll have to discuss Lily's enrollment. I felt my stomach drop, not because of the money, which I could cover in my sleep, but because I hadn't known about this. At some point, without telling me, Daniel had moved Lily's after-school tuition, $620 a month, onto his own card, quietly, like a man setting up a smaller, separate life. I paid it from my phone before the call ended. Then I went home that night and asked him about it, as calmly as I could. A mother should handle childcare, he said. He didn't look up from his phone. There it was. Not confusion, not a budgeting mistake. Belief. A genuine, settled belief that childcare, our daughter's after-school care, was somehow categorically mine, even while the rest of his money sat untouched for things I'd never see. I didn't say anything else that night. I went into the bathroom, sat on the edge of the tub, and just breathed for a minute. My hands were shaking again. I remember thinking, very clearly, something is wrong here that has nothing to do with a spreadsheet. I was right. I just didn't know yet how wrong. 3 nights later, Daniel left his iPad on the bathroom counter while he showered. It buzzed. I wasn't trying to snoop. I want to be honest about that because I know how this sounds, but the screen lit up with a notification banner from an app I'd never seen on his phone or our shared computer. Chase Mobile, account ending 44471, balance $22,014.07. I stood there in the doorway of our bathroom, steam curling out from behind the shower curtain, staring at a banking notification for an account that did not exist anywhere in our shared financial life, not on our joint accounts, not on the budgeting app we'd set up together in 2019, and that Daniel had quietly stopped updating sometime in early 2024, which I'd noticed and chalked up to him just being bad with that stuff, because that's what 6 years of being the responsible one teaches you to assume. I didn't touch the iPad. I didn't need to. I just stood there doing math in my head the same way I'd done it at the kitchen table 3 weeks earlier, except this time the numbers were doing the work for me. 8 months. If that account had been growing steadily, and if, as I now strongly suspected, Daniel's sudden inability to afford his half of $3,665 a month had started right around the same time, he hadn't been unable to pay. He'd been hiding money from me, while telling me, to my face, that he didn't have $135 a month for our daughter's after-school care. I went back to bed before he got out of the shower. I lay there with my eyes open until 1 a.m., and somewhere around midnight, a thought arrived that I couldn't unthink. If he's hiding money, what else is he hiding? The next morning, while Daniel was in the shower again, a man's routines are a gift to the person investigating him. I opened the Venmo app on our shared family iPad, the one we both used for splitting bills with friends. I told myself I was checking if he'd reimbursed me for the daycare payment. He hadn't. But scrolling down, I found a name I didn't recognize, saved simply as R. A $64 payment, memo, dinner. A $310 payment, memo, hotel split, TX. A payment with a single heart emoji and no memo at all for $45. And 3 separate charges, each around $100, each labeled only with a date. And each date, when I checked against our shared calendar, lined up exactly with one of Daniel's regional training trips to San Antonio. I sat on the bathroom floor, actual cold tile, actual goosebumps on my arms, and took screenshots of every single one. My hands were shaking so badly the first 3 photos came out blurry. I had to brace the iPad against my knee to hold it still. Then I sent everything to my brother, Marcus, who works in IT and has, ever since we were kids, had an almost frightening talent for finding things on the internet that people don't want found. His reply came at 2:14 a.m. I found out who R is. Sit down. Ryan Mercer, Senior Marketing Director at Daniel's company. A woman, mid-30s, based out of the San Antonio regional office. Her LinkedIn listed a promotion to that role roughly 9 months earlier. 9 months. Right around when the training trip started. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that because I think people expect the crying to come at this point in the story, and it didn't. Not yet. What I felt instead was something closer to relief. Not because I wanted this to be true, but because for the first time in months, the confusion was gone. The fog lifted. Every weird detail, the bathroom phone habit, the bounced daycare payment, the sudden fairness speech that conveniently happened right around the time he needed his income private. All of it clicked into a single, ugly, coherent shape. I closed the laptop, I went to bed, and in the morning, I called a lawyer. Margaret Chen had been practicing family law for 22 years, the last 11 of them almost exclusively in high-conflict divorce and custody cases. Her office was on the 9th floor of a building downtown, all glass and quiet, and she had a way of looking at you over her glasses that made you feel like she'd already heard your story 100 times before, which, it turned out, she had. I laid it all out for her. The spreadsheet, the daycare call, the hidden account, the Venmo screenshots, Ryan Mercer's LinkedIn. She didn't react the way I expected. No gasp, no sympathetic head tilt. She just nodded slowly, the way a doctor nods at an x-ray. The hidden account matters, she said. The affair matters. Judges aren't supposed to weigh adultery and property division in Texas, but it matters for credibility, and credibility matters a lot once this gets in front of a judge. But I'll tell you what your strongest card is, and it's not the affair. What is it? 6 years of documented financial imbalance, followed by a sudden, one-sided demand for an equal split that he never intended to follow himself. That's not a marriage disagreement. That's a pattern. And patterns are what judges believe. She told me to do 3 things. Act normal, gather everything, and wait. Don't confront him yet, she said. The moment you confront him, he starts thinking like a defendant. Right now, he doesn't know you know anything. That's the most valuable thing you have. Don't spend it cheaply. So for 2 weeks, I cooked dinner. I asked Daniel about his day. I let him kiss me on the forehead. And every single night, after he fell asleep, he'd started sleeping like a man with nothing on his conscience, which I now understand was its own kind of tell. I copied another statement, another screenshot, another piece of the picture. Margaret connected me with David Park, CPA, a forensic accountant she'd worked with on a dozen cases. David's job was to take my 11-tab spreadsheet and Daniel's hidden account activity and turn it into something a judge could read in 15 minutes and understand completely. He built a single timeline, 6 years of household contributions on one side, 8 months of secret savings and Venmo transfers to R on the other, lined up month by month. This is about as clean as these things get, David told me on our second call, and I remember he said it almost gently, like he felt bad for how clean it was. Most spouses are sloppy about hiding money. Your husband was sloppy about everything. Margaret also brought in Tom Bricker, a licensed private investigator she used sparingly and only when it's worth it. I balked at first. It felt like overkill, like something out of a TV show, but Margaret was blunt. If this goes to trial, I saw a notification on his iPad is hearsay your husband's lawyer will tear apart in 30 seconds. A licensed investigator's report is something different. Tom spent 4 days confirming what I already knew. Ryan Mercer's name on the lease of a short-term rental in San Antonio, dated to overlap with 2 of Daniel's training trips. A credit card statement, subpoenaed later, with Margaret's help once the petition was filed, showing the 3rd Airbnb booking, paid for from the hidden Chase account ending in 4471. By the time Tom's report landed in my inbox, I had 6 years of bank statements, a forensic accounting timeline, 3 Venmo screenshots, a private investigator's report, and the daycare's own billing records, showing the bounced payment and Daniel's verbal refusal to cover it. Margaret read through all of it one afternoon, then looked up at me and said, "Okay, now we wait for him to make a move, and then we move first." The move came faster than I expected. On a Wednesday, Daniel announced, almost casually, scrolling his phone at the dinner table while Lily narrated a story about a triceratops, that he had another conference coming up, San Antonio, leaving Friday morning, back Sunday night. I felt my stomach drop, but I kept my voice easy. "Have fun," I said. He looked up, almost surprised, like he'd been braced for a fight that didn't come. He leaned over and kissed my forehead on his way to get Lily a juice box. "Love you," he said. It was the last lie he ever told me. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway Friday morning, 7:52 a.m., I checked the clock. I'll always remember the clock. I started moving. I'd rented a 2-bedroom apartment 15 minutes away 2 weeks earlier, paid for it in cash from an account Daniel didn't know existed. Yes, I'd learned that much from him at least. I'd already set up Lily's room, her dinosaur sheets, her nightlight, a few of her books, quietly in pieces, over several errands that were really just trips to the apartment with a trunk full of boxes. That Friday, I packed the rest. Not furniture. I didn't want a fight over furniture, and honestly, I didn't want any of it. I packed documents, photos, Lily's school records, her birth certificate, her favorite stuffed triceratops, the framed picture of my parents, my grandmother's ring, the things that mattered, the things that couldn't be replaced or fought over later. I wanted him to come home Sunday night and notice what was gone, not what had been taken. There's a difference, and I needed him to feel it. By Saturday afternoon, Margaret had the divorce petition ready. I signed it at her office, my hand only shaking a little this time, and it was filed with the county that same day, Saturday, while Daniel was 300 miles away, presumably with Ryan Mercer, having no idea that his entire life had just been quietly rezoned without him. Sunday night, 9:47 p.m., my phone rang. "Daniel, where is Lily?" "With me," I said. "She's asleep. We're fine." "What's going on? I just got home and the house is empty." "Claire, what the hell? How was San Antonio?" I asked. A pause, just a beat too long. "Fine. How was Ryan?" The silence that followed was the loudest sound I have ever heard in my life. It went on for maybe 4 full seconds, but I could have read a paragraph in that silence. It was confirmation, complete and total, of everything I already knew. And he knew that I knew. And he knew that I knew that he knew. There was nothing left to perform. "It's not what you think," he finally said. "It's exactly what I think," I said. And for the first time in this entire ordeal, my voice cracked. Not from sadness, but from the sheer release of saying it out loud after weeks of silence. 3 Airbnb bookings, $3,400 through Venmo, dinner, a hotel split, a heart emoji, Daniel. I have all of it. "Claire, you used money I earned," I said, "to build weekends with another woman while telling me, to my face, that you couldn't afford your daughter's after-school care." He didn't say anything else. There wasn't anything else to say. "Good night, Daniel," I said and hung up. I'll admit, the certified letter, the custody suit, the claims of abandonment and financial abuse knocked me sideways for about an hour. Even knowing it was coming, even knowing it was almost certainly his lawyer's idea, a get-ahead-of-the-narrative strategy I'd later learn is depressingly common, seeing those words attached to my name made my chest go tight. I called Margaret. She didn't sound worried at all, which somehow made me feel worse and better at the same time. "The person who files first doesn't win, Claire," she said. "The person with better evidence wins. And we have better evidence." What Margaret sent to Daniel's attorney that week was, by her own description, not subtle. A 47-page evidentiary package, 6 years of David Park's reconciled financial records, showing in cold, undeniable numbers exactly who had funded this family and exactly when Daniel's inability to pay had mysteriously begun. 8 months earlier, the same month the Chase account ending in 4471 had been opened. Bank statements for that account, obtained through formal discovery once the petition was filed, showing $22,014.077 in steadily accumulated transfers diverted from his paycheck. The Venmo records, Tom Bricker's investigators report, with the San Antonio lease documents, and the dates lined up against Daniel's submitted business travel expense reports, which it turned out his own employer hadn't approved for 2 of the 3 trips, because they weren't for the company at all. And the daycare records, Dana from Little Explorers had, at Margaret's request, provided a written statement confirming the bounced autopay, the date, and a brief note about the phone call, in which Daniel had stated he didn't believe childcare was his financial responsibility. The last page of the package was a single paragraph. I still remember the closing line, because Margaret read it to me over the phone before she sent it, and I asked her to read it twice. "Daniel Rosser's claims of abandonment and financial abuse are directly contradicted by documented evidence spanning 6 years, including evidence of his own undisclosed assets, undisclosed romantic relationship, and refusal to financially provide for the minor child in question. Petitioner respectfully requests the court take judicial notice of the enclosed exhibits, designated A through Y, prior to any further proceedings. 25 exhibits, A through Y." By that Friday, 5 days after the package went out, Daniel had fired his lawyer. I don't know exactly what was said in that conversation, but I can imagine it. No attorney wants to walk into a courtroom holding a client whose own bank records prove he's lying. By the following week, Ryan Mercer had blocked Daniel on every platform Tom Bricker could find, which, given Tom's job, was apparently most of them. I heard secondhand through someone at Daniel's office that Ryan had gone to HR before Daniel could, framing it as a consensual relationship that had ended badly, which, given that the company had a fairly strict policy about senior leadership and direct reports, Ryan oversaw vendor relationships in Daniel's region, which was apparently close enough, resulted in what I was told was a mutual separation for both of them within the month. I don't know all the details of that, and honestly, I stopped wanting to know. 2 weeks after the 47 pages went out, there were 3 quiet knocks at my apartment door. It was 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Lily was asleep down the hall. hall. I checked the peephole, and there was Daniel, thinner than I remembered, which surprised me, like the last 6 weeks had physically taken something out of him. He was wearing the same gray Patagonia jacket he'd worn on our first date 11 years ago, which felt like either the saddest or the most pointed detail of the entire night, and I genuinely couldn't decide which. I opened the door but didn't step back to let him in. "I'm not here to fight," he said. His voice was quiet, flat. All the performance, the chin-up confidence from the dinner table, the wounded husband routine from the petition, even the panic from that first morning with the spreadsheet, all of it was gone. What was left looked like a person I'd never actually met before. In 9 years of marriage, he told me everything. The account, he'd opened it 8 months ago, after a co-worker mentioned a side fund he kept from his wife, and Daniel had thought, in his words, it would just be for me for once. The trips, 3 of them, all real, all with Ryan, all paid for in part with money he'd told me. To my face, he didn't have. He didn't try to minimize any of it. I think by that point, he'd run out of the energy it takes to lie. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and set something on the small table by my door. "The house key. The house is yours," he said. "I'm not going to fight the custody thing. I talked to a different lawyer just for advice, and he said I didn't have a case anyway, not after everything." He almost smiled, but it didn't make it all the way there. "I just want to see Lily. That's it. That's all I came here to ask." I looked at the key for a long moment. Then I picked it up. "We'll talk about a schedule," I said. "Through Margaret. Lily still needs her dad. The version of him that shows up anyway." It was the most generous thing I could honestly offer, and I think we both knew it. He nodded, and after a second, he turned and walked back down the hallway toward the elevator. I watched him go. He didn't look back. The divorce was finalized in April. I kept the house. Daniel didn't contest it, and given what David Park's records showed about who had actually paid for it over 9 years, Margaret said no judge would have ruled otherwise, even if he had. I sold it 3 months later anyway. Too many ghosts in that kitchen. Lily and I moved into a smaller place closer to her school, with a yard just big enough for the trampoline she'd been asking for since she was 4. Daniel sees her every other weekend. He's good with her, actually. Better than I expected, in a strange way. Like losing everything else clarified something in him about what was actually left to lose. He's renting a 1-bedroom across town. Last I heard, he'd started seeing a therapist, which I genuinely hope helps him, in the distant, unbothered way you hope a stranger's flight isn't delayed. As for the 22 Sauders and 14 I Sauder Owen Sudbury, half of it, by the final settlement, came to me as part of the property division. On top of what the forensic accounting had already established, he owed in back contributions. I put it toward Lily's college fund. It felt like the only thing to do with it that made any sense. A few weeks ago, Lily asked me, out of nowhere, while we were making dinosaur-shaped pancakes on a Saturday morning, "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy live with us anymore?" I thought about all the things I could say. The spreadsheet, the 50-50, the hidden account, the Venmo, San Antonio, the 47 pages, Exhibit A through Y. What I actually said was, sometimes grown-ups want different things, baby, but Daddy loves you, and I love you, and that part never changes. She nodded, satisfied, and asked if she could have chocolate chips in her pancakes too. I said yes. Obviously, I said yes. Daniel wanted his income to be his. Separate, protected, untouchable, his. He got exactly that. It just turned out that everything else was never really his to keep.